watching a Brene Brown YouTube video earlier this week, and what stood out to me is she talked about how through her years of extensive and broad research, she came to learn that the majority of people are only able to identify three emotions within themselves. And they were happy, sad, and mad. Just three emotions, which is quite a big thing when you consider all of the emotions that are available to us. There's about 235 emotions here, and yet the majority of us are only able to recognize three: happy, sad, and mad. That's not a lot. So what's happening with all of the other emotions? Where are they? What's going on with them? And why does it matter that we aren't able to connect with our emotions? Does it matter at all? So first of all, why? Why do we only have the ability for most of us to connect with three emotions? Well, we are a society committed to avoiding all negative emotions at pretty much all costs. As I go on my journey, I realise more and more the truth of the saying that there are no good or bad emotions. There simply are. They just are. They just exist. They're not good or bad, and all of them are messengers to allow us to have a deeper understanding of ourselves and of life. And yet we are committed to not feeling the negative emotions such as laziness, apathy, lack of motivation, sadness, depression, anxiety. And so we do everything we can to not feel them. We try to block them, numb them, push them down, and cover them up. And these habits start from quite a young age. You've probably said it yourself, heard it yourself, remember experiencing it yourself, being told to stop crying when you were being overly emotional, or just emotional. When you were being very excitable, you might have been told to calm down. And if you were being, worried about something, you might have been told to not be silly. And so we have influences around us that were not taught how to sit with their emotions, and that gets passed down the family line. So if they don't know how to sit with their own emotions, they can't teach us to sit with our emotions, and then we do the same for our children unless we learn otherwise. So it's just ongoing pattern of not sitting with, not understanding, not connecting with, and therefore not processing those emotions that have been labelled as negative or undesirable. And so as we become adults and these emotions come up, because they will, because you're human, and therefore you can't not feel them, they will come up. But because we are disconnected from them, we're not able to recognise them, we're not able to label them, we don't know what to do with them. And so we create a very subconscious pattern, a very quick reflex that we're not even aware of, to try and move them, to get rid of them and to not feel them. And this might look like overdoing, keeping really busy, because when you're really busy, you can't feel how you're feeling. It might look like overworking. It might look like a sex compulsion or a porn compulsion, over shopping, overspending, binging out on TV, drugs, drinking, overeating, undereating, things like hair pulling or spot picking, all sorts of compulsive behaviours that we don't quite understand why we're doing, and we really want to stop them, but we're not sure how, because it's an automatic subconscious reflex that we learned from a very young age as a way to not feel our feelings. Okay, so let me share a real life example. Okay, I have a member of my family who I love very dearly who's unwell at the moment, and this brings me a lot of sadness. And historically, I have been very disconnected from my emotions, and for me, that showed up in many different ways: skin picking, overeating, undereating, massively overachieving, housework compulsion, all sorts of ways. And I've been healing that over the years. And so I was able to recognize the other day that I was feeling sadness and that I didn't want to feel it. And what I was doing was going to bed late. And the reason I was going to bed late is because tiredness feels more palatable to me than sadness. So after about 3 nights, I was like, oh, what am I doing? Okay, I'm staying up late because I want to avoid feeling sad, and feeling tired feels much easier to me than feeling sad. So the default pattern of old, which had been imprinted in me and had been there for many years, is still there to a degree, but with the awareness, I can choose to take alternative actions. Okay, so of all of these emotions, I counted them, it's about 235. Typically, we only feel around 3 of them: happy, mad, and sad. And in order to not feel the others, we create distractions. As I say, porn, sex, shopping, hair pulling, drugs, alcohol, overdoing, overachieving. All of these different ways to avoid feeling our feelings. But there's a few things about this that are less than ideal. Okay, so the first one being that you can't numb one emotion. So you can't numb sadness or anxiety and do that without numbing them all. So in trying to avoid these negative emotions, we also remove our ability to feel all of those wonderful emotions like excitement and joy and feeling elated and exuberant and vibrant. We are unable to feel those with any real degree or regularity if we are not also feeling the other end of the spectrum: the sadness, the worry, the fear, the anger. Numb them all. One, you numb them all. Numb one emotion, you numb them all. So we deny ourselves the experience of some of those more pleasant and uplifting emotions. One of the other drawbacks of not feeling our feelings is that it actually creates more suffering, because the compulsive behaviour that we use to avoid the undesirable feelings typically creates shame. We feel a huge amount of shame about these patterns of behaviour that we don't want to do and that we can't seem to stop doing. Even after periods of abstinence, it kind of springs back in and you can't stop yourself from doing it. And there's a huge amount of shame about your inability to control yourself and the actual activity in which you're engaging in. So by trying to avoid your negative emotions, you actually create more suffering. That, and you can't actually avoid them. You are human and you will feel these emotions, and if you try to push them away, they will come back with the same velocity. So as much as you bat it away, it will come back, and the harder you bat it away, the bigger it will come back. So if you what does this look like? So like anxiety, that's the severe feeling of worry, and depression is the severe feeling of sadness, right? So it will come out in the extreme. The more you push it away, the harder you push it away, the more extreme it will come back out and bite you in the arse with it. The other drawback of not feeling our feelings is that we, as humans, are here to experience, to feel, to actually go through all of those emotions, that we have them for a reason. They are messengers to us. And so to disconnect from the emotions, you disconnect from life, and you have to disconnect from yourself because you are feeling them. And in an attempt to not feel them, you have to disconnect from yourself. You have to numb out. And therefore you disconnect from life and other people. It's really hard to have a deep, connected, loving relationship, whether that's friends, family, colleagues, partner. It's really hard to be connected if you are not connected to yourself. And so there is a false sense of safety in not feeling our feelings. And it does take some practice, because you've been practicing your whole life to not feel them. I sure did. It's taken a real big commitment on my part. And my most dominant feeling over the first 35 years of my life was anger. I used anger to avoid My internet's flashing. Hopefully you can still hear me. I use anger to avoid all other emotions. So if I felt sad or worried or lonely or unmotivated, for me, I would use anger because that was one of the three emotions that I knew how to feel and express. And for me, anger felt empowering. So I didn't want to feel sad because that for me felt demotivating. It would render me weak and vulnerable, and I didn't feel strong in that position. Whereas anger would be like, yes, I'm going to show the world. Yes, I'm going to do this. Yeah, I'm going to throw myself into that task. And I would use anger to avoid all other feelings because it gave me a false sense of power. It wasn't a very healthy sense of power. It was a false sense of power. So it's a false economy to not feel your feelings, is what I'm saying. You know, you numb one, you numb them all. You actually can't get rid of them, so you increase the level of suffering. You tend to feel a bit of shame, a lot of shame, around the activity that you're doing to not feel the feelings, and you disconnect from yourself and therefore from life and from other people. And we're here to love and connect and to experience, and to not feel is to deny yourself the experience of life. So if you are experiencing anxiety or depression, apathy, if you are finding yourself caught in a web, a cycle of compulsive behavior of something that you don't want to do in the way that you're doing it, but you can't seem to stop, whether that's drinking too much or thinking too much, that's another way to avoid feelings. You're watching too much TV, you're overeating, you're not eating enough, you're working too hard. If you're finding yourself in compulsive, repetitive cycle of behavior and you want to stop and you don't know how to stop, if you are experiencing intense emotions that you're really not wanting to, such as anxiety and depression, this for me is an indication that you are disconnected from your wider set of emotions, and you would benefit, you would release yourself from suffering through learning to connect your emotions so that you can feel them, process them, and release them, and enjoy the experience of feeling, so that you can enjoy the experience of life. So if this is resonating with you, if you are suffering in the ways that I've described, I would love to work with you and help you to understand why you do what you do, why you feel the way that you feel, and how to move past that, because you can. I have. I help many other people do it, and in connecting to our feelings, we truly get to experience and enjoy life. And I invite you to allow yourself to have that, because we got this life. We should make the most of it, shouldn't we? We should live it and enjoy it. So I hope that's been useful. I hope it brings some understanding and some insight. And if you have any questions or you want to talk more about it, then drop me a comment or send me a message, and I'd love to have a chat with you. Have a great weekend.